Okay, so in this video, we are going to learn about estimating square roots. And why do we need to do that? That is because of the reason in our day-to-day lives, we don't always necessarily deal with numbers that are perfect squares, and we might just want to have an estimation as to what is the square root of that number. So let us just try to see how would we tackle this problem of estimating a square root. Now let us say that we are given a number 80, and what would be the square root of 80? So we know that 80 is not a perfect square. Okay, in that case I would be happy to find an estimate. So what we might do is we might do a little bit of iteration. So let's look at the numbers whose squares would be around 80. So as I said, I have taken a simple example over here, and we'll take another example which is a slightly more complicated, but just to understand the concept, we know what number when squared gives number that is closer to 80. So straight away you might say that 8 squared, it gives me 64, and 9 squared gives me 81. Okay, so we know that square root of 81 is 9. So can we write this statement as the square root of 80 is greater than 8, but it has to be lesser than 9, right? The square root of 80 lies between 8 and 9. Or to put it in other words, now, but we see that 80 is very near to the square of 9, which is 81. So I would say that, you know, the square root of 80 is roughly equal to 9. So this is just an estimate. It's very close to that. It's not the perfect one. Now, let us say that we want to find out, let's say another number we have is, let us take 250. So how do we find out the square root of this number? What is the square root of 250? Now this is not a perfect square, so you might want to do a few iterations. So let's say let us say we do 10 square, so that gives me 100. And if I were to say, let's say 20 square, okay, what would that give us? 20 square would give us 400. Wow. So we have 100. Now 100 is kind of a bit farther away from 250. Similarly, 400 is also 150 units farther away from 250. So let's try some other numbers, maybe more closer. So let's say, how about 15 square? So 15 square gives us 225, and 16 square would give us 256. That is what we would have. So now if you look at it closely, we have 250, and then we have 256. So from this, it clearly tells us that the square root of 250, it is greater than 15, but it is going to be lesser than 16. But since 250 is very close to the square of 16, which is 256, we would approximate the square root of 250 to be roughly equal to 16. So this is just an approach of how do we estimate the square roots.